Welcome everyone to The Wire. Here we are, all of our lovely clients who are undertaking their service excellence accreditation at various stages in the preparation for that. And standard 3.3 today. What is it, Kay? Kay knows all the standards off by heart because she's an amazing assessor. And I won't drop you in it, Kay, but it's called the Purchasing and Contract Management Standard. So what we're going to do today is go through, if you had to purchase something significant in your organisation, I'm going to be asking you, what sorts of things would you consider? And then we'll have a look at the requirements for this standard in the evidence guide. And then we will share with you some high-risk areas, some gaps that we sometimes see in this standard, so you can be aware of where some potential pitfalls might be. And we'll give you some good practice tips. I've got 10 good practice tips for purchasing and contract management standard. I've also got always some freebies, some free resources that we're going to upload with the recording as well. So there we go. That's our little hour of power today. You ready? Yes. And you can talk or not talk. It's totally up to you, however you like to keep yourself alive during the webinar. And thanks, everybody, for your respectful acknowledgements. I appreciate it. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here are some sort of questions that I thought we could answer today. You could have a think about whether your procurement procedure meets the requirements. We can have a look at some processes and tools that might be helpful. You can talk about what you use, to manage your contracts in your organisation. If you've only got a couple, well, you probably don't need a sophisticated tool. But if you've got loads, like I know some of your organisations do, you probably want to have some sort of tool to help you to keep it all in order. And what evidence will we be looking for? Do you review your suppliers and contractors? If you've had a supplier, such as if you've been with the same phone company for your mobile phones and your phones in your office, if you've been with them for a long, long time, is it as good as you can get? And if you've gone through a process recently in your organisation to review a major supplier, maybe you want to talk about what you did, how you did that. Sharing. All right, when I was doing a little bit of preparation today for our session, I was really interested in how these terms are used interchangeably. Procurement and purchasing. In the standard, it talks about purchasing. And then in the evidence guide, it says, do you have a procurement policy? And I thought, oh, hang on. So here we go. Here's the differences between procurement and purchasing, according to some, site on the internet that I found. What do you think, though? In your organisation, you might have a procurement policy, or you might have a purchasing policy. Either way, however it is that you, get to go and get sort of, new items into your organisation, or the way that you contract suppliers should be documented. And for some of you, it'll be documented in a procurement policy. And for some of you, it'll be documented in a purchasing policy and procedure. Doesn't matter, as long as it's written down how it happens. So there you go. Procurement's the overarching sort of how it all happens. And then purchasing is how we sort of order, receive the item or the service, and how we make payment. There we go. There we go. Just a little bit of inside information. Now let's have a bit of a chat. If you were buying a new vehicle, now these are one of our lovely clients in Mildura, volunteer transport organisation, and they recently had to purchase a new vehicle. If you were going to have some money to purchase a new vehicle, isn't that nice that you would have that? It's imaginary. I know not everybody's got money for new cars lying around, but if you did, Before you went out and put your money down, what would you be thinking about? You can type in the chat or you can talk to me.
So we just had to buy a new car, and we had to think about the type of use, the running costs, if we could afford it. So we had to look at the costs involved in it. And then I think one of the biggest things was about how do we maintain it? What does that look like? And then we needed to also consider whether the board was going to agree with it or not. They were going to approve the purchase of that vehicle. So that was some of the things we thought about. Yeah. Interestingly enough, we had to buy in Queensland, not New South Wales.
Now, what was that about, Steph? Can you share why that was?
Availability of stock. So
yeah.
So then we had to negotiate transport costs and everything. But the type of vehicle we needed, there's not a lot of. Well, we needed a people mover that also was a removalist vehicle, being in accommodation services. So we need to be able to lay all the seats down and load it up with all the clients' belongings and move them from point A to B, and there's very minimal options. Yeah.
Exactly. So you did. You took your time over that one. You did a lot of research.
Yeah, lots of research. Took us a while. Yeah.
Now, I'm interested in what you said there about then we had to try and get it approved by the board. Are there any board members here today that want to talk about the sorts of things that they'd want to see if they were going to approve a purchase like a new vehicle, or anyone who's recently had to put anything up to a board? What do they want to see in order to be able to go, yep?
Business case.
Very good. And a business case, what does that discuss? What does a business case talk about? What would it be telling the board?
Well, the first thing you'd have to do is convince them you need a car.
Excellent.
Yeah,
right. So there's a need.
Yeah. That would be the first instance. Then you would need to describe what needs would be fulfilled by the vehicle, because that will then define the type of vehicle. Once you've got them happy with the need and the use, or the uses that it can be put to, then the next step is to say, okay, here's 3 options of 3 types of vehicles, and here's the pricing we've been able to negotiate. Have at it, basically.
Beautiful.
I'm in a unique position because I'm part of what is called an advisory board in our organisation, because it's proprietary limited.
Yeah.
It doesn't have need for cars because the type of services we provide, the workers provide their own transport and that sort of thing, but there's one communal car used by the admin staff here. So the purchasing process was just that. The board member, spoke to me, the board member, about those very same things. And the other one that hit the high road was the running costs and the maintenance costs. Now, because it was only a sedan, the maintenance costs were, when we compared the various brands. The other thing too, of course, was the availability of parts. So we didn't want, excuse my possible prejudice, we didn't want anything Chinese, because there's no telling whether you're going to get parts or not, depending on how our relationships are with China. So that restricted us more to the more popular brands of Toyota, Mazda, Ford, Holden, that sort of thing. When we did our research, then Toyota came in on top of the list as far as maintenance was concerned, because for the first 5 years of the car's life, it's a fixed price contract.
Yes. So
there's certainty there.
Right.
And in year 5, we're thinking about replacing it so we can go to another certain fixed price contract. The second thing was the running costs of the car. So we looked at a petrol car, a diesel car, and a hybrid. Of the 3, the hybrid came out on top because a lot of the energy you expend in slowing down or going down hills is put back into the car to be used for going along the road and up the hills. So that reduces your petrol costs considerably, and also the wear and tear on the engine. So those sorts of things that focused us on hybrids. And as I said, the fixed cost focuses right down to a Toyota. Then we had to decide the type of sedan we wanted. And we ended up getting a Camry because it's large enough to transport our admin people around, but also if they have to do some emergency transport, there's room there to take other passengers.
Well, I hope everybody's taken down. Now, we need the model number and all of that there because people, you've done all the research now. If anybody's in the market for a car, Bob knows. He's done all the analysis. But Bob's talking there about considerations such as life cycle costs. And so, you know, it's when you get 3 quotes, you know, it's not just 3 quotes. It's really quite a deep analysis when you're up for a major purchase in an organisation, you know, and the life cycle costs can be the things that can break you. And so purchase versus leasing is another thing that you might sometimes consider when you're purchasing something, you know, not just a car, you know, but other sorts of equipment that you might be using in your organisation as well. So, you know, we'll be talking about this, but we're at the point where we're getting approval from the board, and the board is making decisions. And most times, you know, they be the delegated sort of buck stops here sort of for a major purchase. You know, we're talking thousands here. So those delegations need to be quite clear, and boards really do need to tell their senior managers what they need on the table to be able to make that decision. You know, do they need a risk analysis? They need all the life cycle costs in front of them. They need comparisons done, not just here's 3 quotes. You know, that really doesn't help a board to make a good decision. Yeah.
My experience with dealing with other boards in other not-for-profits and in private schools is that for the most part, the board members are voluntary members and probably wouldn't have all the smarts about them to us for those sorts of things. So it's our responsibility to tell them those sorts of things so that if the ball bounces back at some time in the future, they can say, well, we had all these things done to prove that we needed that purchase and that was the right purchase. So it's a safeguard for the board as well as anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you know, I suppose what we're talking about here is a range of things that needs to be considered when we're getting into, you know, big purchases. Yeah. So we're just kicking this around. That's been super helpful, Bob. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to add to the list of things we need to consider if we're making a major purchase like a vehicle? Just teasing this out in terms of some practice at the moment. Here's a different one. Here's a different sort of a purchase, which still comes under purchasing and contract management. This is one that everybody probably has some experience with, is if we move away from the vehicle, we need to think about things like contracting in expertise, using a consultant. Now, what are the things, this is also part of your purchasing, part of your contract management. So when you're thinking about using an expert or using a consultant or, you know, buying in some expertise, what sorts of things are you thinking about there? Has anybody had to do this recently? Now, you might be spending a fair bit of money on this external person and you might know them quite well, or you might not know them very well at all. Everybody here has spent a fair bit of money purchasing our services as your service excellence assessor. You know, what sorts of things go into this kind of decision making, this kind of purchase?
Sometimes I think having like a really clearly defined scope and roles and responsibilities of what you're asking of the consultant, and considering any conflicts of interest.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent start. What else?
My experience is that consultants can be great salespersons. So you need to be able to look past the words of their mouth and into the quality of their deeds.
Yes, Bob. Good point, Bob. What I was here, someone else was going to say something then about, you know, contracting a consultant or an expert or someone that you're going to be, you know, paying. We've seen organisations, haven't we, Kane, that have paid consultants tons of money, tons. I'm talking 30,000 above, right? For things like policy and procedure manuals. Things like that.
Mhm.
And if anyone's ever been taken for a ride, you don't have to share that, but just what are the learnings from that? If you feel like you haven't gotten value from a consultant before, what learnings do you take from that? And what do you look for now when you're contracting a person to provide you with a service?
I think Sharon was talking to the fact that the qualifications of the person. I look at integrity and also how their values align with the organisation. I think that's really important.
It's very important. The values alignment.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know that our relationship with you, with your organisations, is documented in an agreement. And it says there all the things we're going to do and all the things, you know, that you could look for and timeframes. So that, you know, documenting the consultancy or documenting the service and then checking in on that, making sure that you are getting your deliverables when you have been promised them. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that about the deliverables, like a really clear set of deliverables or specifications. And I think some organisations that we deal with they're getting in consultants because they don't know what they don't know. Like, you know, they don't know how to build a website. So there's sort of discomfort about what they ask for, and they kind of rely on the consultant to help them define that, which can be, yeah, like a open check, really. So, yeah, like I would just say that, you know, you need to just kind of go with that discomfort and go, you know, sorry if I'm being dumb here, but tell me exactly what you're going to give me and when, and put it in writing.
Exactly. So I think sometimes it's thinking about protecting yourself, and you won't think like that until you sort of put a risk lens over it. All right. So oftentimes we've got money to spend on a consultant. How wonderful is this? It's great. Sometimes that's a grant. It's come from government. Oh, right. Money falling from heaven. And then you think, oh, who can we get? Who can we get to do this work? You know, and if you're in a small country town, like some people are, you'll get the people that you like. You know, maybe you'll get the people that someone else said did a good job for them. And it can all just turn into something very sort of informal. And I think, you know, if you sat down and you thought about how could this go terribly wrong for us, then you might approach it very differently. And that's a good question to ask yourself. That's putting a risk lens over it. Yeah. So, you know,
we've sorry.
No, go
ahead,
Steph. No, it's lovely to hear from you.
We've faced a number of challenges trying to engage a consultant to help us around our cultural safety. And in the midst of that, there's lots of time delays because we engaged a number of people that I think we relied on them to, because we didn't know what we didn't know. And so we relied on them to kind of put the structure together for us. And in the midst of it, that created many, many delays, but it also gave us lots of learning about what it is we actually do require and what it is that we're looking for. And many hours of lots of self-research and time on your guys' website and the BCN website and everyone else's website. But yeah, so we engaged, not that we paid a lot of money, but we engaged 3 so far that haven't necessarily been able to help us get over the line. Yeah, so then anyway, it's been lots of learning. So now we've spending more time getting out there with the elders and having some conversations with them and kind of just getting a real understanding from the ground. But we had to make those mistakes along the way to realize that's where we needed to be.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to be talking to an organisation that sort of feels like the mistakes we make, you know, are part of our improvement process, you know, because it's mistakes are you know, they're a fantastic learning opportunity, really, if you decide to reflect on them and take those learnings forward. Good on you. It sounds like,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to be getting the right sort of mentoring and guidance around all of that by, talking to the keepers of knowledge, the elders.
Yes. Which was said in early in the beginning, but I felt like it needed to be a professional person. And so then I got so caught up on the professional person, rather than actually there's a lot of information that says go speak to the elders. Like, yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, I'm back at the elders.
Yeah, no, we do think we've got to apply this kind of business way of doing everything, don't we?
Yeah.
But, you know, talking and listening.
Yeah.
They've been working, you know, for thousands and thousands of years, talking and listening.
Absolutely. And they're very specific to our area, you know. So not just our ATSI community, because we have quite a strong Chinese community and Nepalese community as well. And so
Wonderful. Well, there are plenty of opportunities there, hey? Kelsey, waiting patiently, Kelsey, thank you.
No, I mean, that was really useful. Thanks, Steph. I think similar-ish, I guess, related to what Steph was saying, is often we engage consultants to do a piece of work, but then it's actually the implementation and the change management that comes with the doing of that work with our people and our operations and embedding that. And I think that is something to make sure is kind of either built into the scope or is considered from a resource perspective as an organisation, and having that managed appropriately internally as well. Because often the consultants can't do the actual work without people.
No, and we find that when we're a merry band of consultants here at Highwire, there are 9 of us, and we see that, and that's our big fear when we get involved, is that we're going to be able to take it so far and then we won't have had any impact because it won't be implemented, you know. And so that's a big risk of buying in expertise. And I love what you said there, Kelsey. You really do need to include in the investment the implementation. Yeah, and that should be really part of costing it, don't you think? You know, it really should be part of the costs, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I love that you said that. That's a big, big risk. We see it all the time. Makes us sad, actually. Makes us sad, yeah. G'day, Robert.
Another thing I've come across when I've worked as a consultant with other organisations is that they're too nice about dealing with the consultant. You know, you've talked to them, they've told you what they can do, you have a contract, but they don't go that next step and say, okay, you promised me by such and such a date we would have this. Where is it?
Exactly.
What have you been doing all this time? Because you're not getting any more money until I see that step of the program or contract fulfilled. A lot of people don't do that. Just they let it ooze on, and so you know eventually they've paid all this money and they're sitting and thinking, where is all this stuff that I've paid for? You know, it's consultants are good at consulting, but not really good at keeping to timelines.
That's right. That's right, and that's what Kay was saying about those deliverables, and those deliverables need to have time frames. So that's you know that's the contract management part of the purchase or the procurement there. Yeah, it's your money, and it's walking out the door. Sometimes that's why we use consultants as an example, because we're consultants ourselves, but we've seen money walk out the door. I've worked. My sweet spot, as many of you know, is working with Aboriginal communities, and oh my goodness. I have seen it walk out the door. So, you know, we don't want that for you. Right. I'm really appreciative of all of those contributions to that conversation, because now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's get into the actual standards. Welcome to anyone who's joined us since we started chatting. Nice to have you here. Here we go. This is the structure of the standard that we're talking about. So it comes under section 3, the financial and contract management section of the standards. It's called Purchasing and Contract Management Standard 3.3. And what you'll see when you have a look at the standards is there's what we call the intent of the standard. So what's it about? What's this about? And the intent of this standard is that explicit purchasing and contracts reflect, and you're in my way there, reflect organisational values, enable disclosure, and ensure integrity and value. All right, so when we're setting a standard around purchasing contract management, that's the intent. And look at this, the organisational outcome here. The organisation is sustainable and socially responsible. So we do need to see some consideration of sustainability and social responsibility in your procurement decisions. There are 4 indicators of success here. We can call them indicators, or you might be calling them requirements. There are 4 requirements that you'll need to meet in order to be able to get ticked off on this standard. Let's have a look at the evidence guide. I'm going to pop the evidence guide into the chat because most of you won't have that at your fingertips, except for Liska. She will. I know she'll have it there right on the desk next to her. That's the kind of person she is, but most of you won't. So I'll put it in the chat and we'll have a look at this evidence guide together. And most of you will have spent a little bit of time in the evidence guide. Okay, just give me a moment to get through the 1,000 clicks and get this to you. There it is. Now, of course, we're looking at the version 9 evidence guide. Here it comes, and I'll give you the page number. It's obviously down at 3.3. And we're on page 40 or thereabouts.
What are we doing?
In the chat.
So you can open up your evidence guide there and slide on down to 3.3. Well, there's some really helpful comments in the chat too. Don't forget to check those out. So 4 indicators here that you would need to be able to, we would need to be able to tick in order for you to meet this standard. So I thought we might just, have a little look at those together, make sure we understand the lingo there, and then we'll get into our sort of good practice evidence that we'd be looking for. Okay, indicator number 1, so 3.3.1. There is a fair and equitable process for the purchase of products and services, ensuring the best outcomes for everyone. So fair and equitable. So this is where, things like best value, alignment with values.
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
And thinking about, decision-making principles, such as a lot of organisations have buy local. A lot of organisations have a First Nations procurement strategy, and a lot of organisations will have some ethical decision-making guidance around we will not purchase from these kinds of organisations, right? I've seen that. Like, for example, I met one recently and they said, well, we never ever will, apply for a grant that's from the proceeds of gambling. They were like, no, we'd never do that. And yet I've met other organisations that, say, yeah, give us that money, we'll have that. Right? So whatever your guidance is, fair and equitable, best outcome for the organisation. Okay. The next indicator here is procedures verify delivery of agreed products or services. Now, people always kind of get a bit stumped with this one. They go, what does that mean? That could mean anything from, if you're getting a box of stationery delivered from Officeworks, you're going to check that everything's in there that you ordered. Or it could mean you've hired a consultant and they've said, yeah, we're going to do all this stuff for you. It's going to be amazing, value for money. And you check that you're getting the agreed service. So like we were talking about before, checking the deliverables and things like that. Yes? So there's a process for making sure you're getting what you ordered. The third one is suppliers are reviewed. Now, why are we reviewing the suppliers? Because we want to check their performance on an ongoing basis. We want to make sure through that review process that we are getting the best value and that they are delivering a quality service to you. Okay, so if you've got a major supplier, such as maybe I'm thinking about phone and IT, or I'm talking about vehicle lease, vehicle lease contract. If you're a big organisation like Tamworth Family Support Services, give us a wave, Tanella. You might have a pretty big fleet. I don't know. I'm just saying they might have a pretty big fleet. And so, they've got what we would call purchasing power in their region. And they might be able to go to their supplier and say, hey, can you do a better deal for us? You see that? Because best value means you're making your dollar go further. You're making your dollar go further towards client outcomes, community outcomes, So that's more money for clients and, that sort of thing that you can negotiate. Do you ever do that, Danelle? Go to your suppliers and say, hey.
I know Sharon's very good at going to suppliers.
The shakedown, Sharon, the shakedown.
Yeah, I've had to do a bit of that in the last couple of days too, let me tell you. Not delivering what we need.
Yeah, all right. So if you've got the resources to be able to keep an eye on this, it is a place where you can sort of stop that money dribbling out the door. So reviewing suppliers on a regular basis. Does it say regular? Let me check that because I always use the term periodic here. What does it say? An ongoing basis. Oh, now that's more in line with what I'm thinking periodically. All right. So for some organisations, that might mean annually. For other organisations, that might mean when the contract expires, 2 years' time, whatever it is. But what you're doing is you have a bit of a schedule for making sure that your major suppliers are checked for service quality and value. There we go. And the fourth one is a record of key decisions, contracts and purchases are securely maintained. Now, this would mean that we would like to see for major purchases, right, wherever it's delegated that level of expenditure in your organisation. For some organisations, it'll be we're small, so it's over $1,000. Other organisations, it's over 10,000. Whatever it is, we want to see that that decision has been recorded. So it'll be in the minutes probably of a board meeting or a senior managers meeting. And if you have got major contracts with lots of suppliers, I mean, you've got contracts with funders as well. You've all got a contract with us, iWire, that they be kept in a way that it's possible to sort of monitor and keep an eye on, right? They're not in a filing cabinet drawer somewhere and nobody quite knows where they are apart from that one person. All right, okay, because contracts do need to be monitored. So there'll be some contracts will have certain KPIs in them, such as funding contracts. So they need to be, sometimes we suggest in a register, for example, so that you can sort of see at a glance when there might be some review dates or where the KPIs might be or what the certain specific deliverables have been agreed to with that contractor. So sometimes they're a bit hidden away and only, one person knows what's supposed to be happening. Makes it difficult to monitor. There we go. So there's your 4 indicators of success there. So you'd need to be ticking all of those in order to meet that standard. And remember that it's about, the size of your organisation, and it's about managing the risk associated with purchasing and contract management. Okay, so if you've only got a couple of contracts, you might not need a register, but if you've got a few, that could be helpful. Questions and comments can come at any time. Certainly if you're doing something amazing or if you've learned something recently that's share-worthy, please share the evidence guides. Remember, the ACES evidence guide is not a checklist. It's not the place you go to find out all the things you need to have in place. They're just examples. All right. So don't get in there and start thinking, oh, we've got to have all this. You don't. Some common gaps that we see. Kay, my fellow assessor, if you can think of any common gaps that you sometimes see in this standard, please feel free to share those with us now.
I would say the most common thing I see is no kind of review processes being a little loose.
Yeah.
Like not being clear who you're going to review and who you're not going to review, or when you're going to review, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And usually what it sort of descends to is when it all goes to custard, we review it, and we boot the current supplier and get a new one. So there might be times where a more structured review process might mean that you could have intervened earlier and avoided a bit of pain.
Great. Thank you. That's super helpful.
So would you be including contracts for employees who are employed on a contract to do certain things? Would that be part of your purview when you're doing the audit?
That's a really good question, Bob. Not specifically, because we'll be looking at that in one of the other standards, which is the HR standard, in particular in 4.1.1, which is where we talk about the way that you employ people and sort of legislative compliance around that, which would be the contract there. Yes, but that's a good way to think. And I suppose you could apply the similar sorts of indicators to that, but no, this is about external suppliers of services to your organisation.
Right, so we're talking about builders and
that
sorts of things, right?
Yep. Cleaners, any supplier of a service at all. Yeah, but also funders, because you do have contracts with funders and they are external. So that's why I'm including them in there. Hello, Karen.
Oh, sorry, Karen, sorry.
Yes, I do have a question. I'm interested to see how if anyone else is navigating this issue. So our issue is about suppliers. So in small regional towns, you're lucky if you can find one supplier that can supply you with one thing. So we've got a small outlying office that's never had a cleaner because we cannot find anyone that will clean with the regular checks and even simple things like vaccination certificates, but also for a price that we can afford. So I'm interested to see how other organisations have gotten around that, because it just throws your whole procurement policy out the window. You can't get 3 quotes because there aren't 3 people in the town that will provide the service.
No, that's not uncommon. I can't speak to that. I don't have a regional remote service, but just from an assessor perspective, you would simply explain that to us, and we would say, well, onwards and upwards, whatever you can do. Some organisations I've noticed in small towns have jumped on the back of a contract with another service in the town or a health service in the town and use their cleaner to come around and do theirs. I want to also suggest that this is an opportunity for a client employment pathway.
I said that to our team, and they said, there are other agencies that are employing cleaners. They're our ex-clients, and I would not be comfortable with having them come into our office and clean our office, which is interesting. But I think, in small towns, it's hard to, find someone that you can trust if you've had a broken relationship with them as a client.
Yes, well, not a client that you've had a broken relationship with, but one that you've had, a very positive sort of exit onto greatness with. Yes, I have seen organisations to deal with workforce challenges in regional remote locations to really think about this as an initiative, and to start working with clients whilst they're setting their goals in our service towards that. In family and domestic violence services, I've seen refuges use women to come back and do the garden maintenance and things like that. So the refuge keeps the mowers and then employs the women to come back and do the garden maintenance and things like that. So, you know, so that they have women who are coming to the service instead of men who are coming to the service to do the lawn. So that sort of thing, yeah. So I have seen that, but I do appreciate that that will sometimes be a challenge where you will need to, you know, be flexible about your procurement policy. Yeah, good one, Karen. Anything else, anyone? Questions or gaps we sometimes see, Kay? I sometimes see that.
I want to raise something possibly pertinent to Karen as well, like little organisations particularly, and little regional organisations that have sometimes had like really long-standing relationships with, Bob the local electrician and that sort of thing, that, there's a trust level there. It's probably a fairly casual relationship where, like we just call him and he comes and, he charges us what he charges us. So like, there's a fair bit of trust that the supplier is giving them, a reasonable price. And I'd say most of the time that's probably justified, but it's the kind of the record keeping around that, is a bit of a challenge for people. So I don't know if you've got any comments on those sort of arrangements. A lot of little services, that's kind of a lot of the suppliers that they use are small, local tradespeople, local shops. That's
and I think part of my response to that is, particularly up our way, we can call 5 tradies and none of them will show up. So you find someone that shows up and you use them because they show up. And
exactly.
You need to have an idea of what unit cost is for a service, like an electrician or something like that. But and we have a budget, so there's scrutiny over the budget, so there's that process. But I'm come from previously from government, where procurement is a major protracted process with 3 written quotes and reviews and possibly interviews with suppliers and that sort of stuff. You can't do that as a small not-for-profit operating on the ground. You basically employ who shows up. As long as they've got the working with children check and vaccination certificate, we're happy that they show up and do a job. And if they don't do a good job, we don't call them back.
I have found in the past, being from a small country town, that some tradespeople can utilise the relationship to their advantage, i.e. they start charging more and more, just because they're an easy payer.
Yes. So this is about your monitoring, right? So just as Karen said, you've got to know the unit price, and this is where the standard says fair and equitable. And I would be concerned, as Kay would be concerned, about any organisation making decisions purely on price, because you have to make decisions based on what's good for your community, what's good for your clients, and what's good for your organisation. And sometimes to be supporting certain suppliers over others is good, the greater good. So we want you to be able to do whatever is best for your organisation, as long as it reaches the intent of that standard, which is fair and equitable, transparent and in the best interest of the organisation. Yeah, not in the best interest of someone's brother, And so a lot of this will be managed through your conflict of interest procedure, where certain people might need to not be involved in those decisions at all, because we might be related and we might have a financial benefit or other from the decision. So we generally find that that's done ethically, that there's a lot of strengths there, and particularly in small towns where you've got to think a bit outside the square to be able to get the work done. And we would probably commend that kind of innovative thinking, to be honest, as long as we put the risk lens over it, as you would, and go, well, okay, well, how could this come back and harm us, So that's the way to be thinking about this. Thanks, everyone, for contributing there. That's very helpful to hear from different sized organisations and different challenges. Sometimes one of the gaps that I sometimes see is that the procurement procedure is very well documented, but often doesn't happen like that in practice. So this is where, if you have got some of those, exceptional arrangements, that you should document them. so that they're there in the procedure. You know, you don't have to, some of these sorts of procedures are very kind of standardized and not really reflective of the practice that's generally undertaken. So review that, make sure that your documentation matches your practice.
Can I say one more thing?
Go for it, Kay.
Am I talking too much? Another thing that is sometimes missing is that kind of risk assessment, that kind of you know, the business case risk assessment thing that goes along, and that, like, you're only going to do that with, you know, a protracted contract or a large purchase. But yeah, there's sort of things like, oh yeah, well, you know, we can show you the, you know, the board minutes where we presented 3 quotes for a car, and the board approved, you know, whatever. That's not a risk assessment, nor is it a business case. So yeah, and look, I think a whole lot of that discussion happens verbally. It's not recorded. So yeah, you know, perhaps a little more rigor on some of those big things would be worth, you know, note them in the minutes. If it's not actually, you know, a written business case, there's still a discussion about it. Would that be a reasonable thing to say, Marie?
Absolutely. It is an indicator within the risk management standard, actually, that a business case is presented for major purchases. So it falls under the risk management standard, but it's definitely applicable here. And that is the reason that we are giving you a template to be able to put up a business case for a major project or purchase, which includes a section for a risk analysis. All right. So if you haven't already got a template to support that process, you're getting one from us for free. Right? So yeah, we developed one for another client recently, so we're going to share that one with you. So let's go. We've got some good practice examples here, or, you know, some good practice sort of steps in this process. And you might consider reviewing your current procurement procedure around some of these tips here from your assessors. So your delegations around who can purchase and how much they can spend are clear, and who has to approve what at what level in the organisation. Yeah, so what goes to senior manager, what goes to the board, that's all clear. The decision-making framework or principles aligned to values. Now, this is a really good governance tip. You know, governance bodies are making decisions all the time in an organisation. What would it look like if they had a framework or some principles for making decisions aligned to their values? All right, so, you know, if their values are about diversity and inclusion, then they might have First Nations procurement strategy, or if their values are around, you know, progressing opportunities for women in employment, then they might employ more women than they do others in their processes. If they're about sustainability and environmental impact, then they might decide how to purchase things based on those kinds of factors. All right, so that's what I mean there. Sustainability issues are considered. So, you know, even life cycle and the waste that might be part of a purchasing decision. Also, sustainability in terms of, you know, if you're doing something as a one-off, you're going to be able to sustain that practice over time. So I mean sustainability in a broad term there, that you are getting some sort of quotes in order to apply that sort of fairness and best value rule to the purchase, that you're undertaking a risk assessment or cost benefit analysis, a bit like Bob was talking before. You know, there's a whole range of things to consider when you're putting up a case for approval of a purchase or a contract. Know when to seek external advice to manage that risk. All right, so we don't know everything, and we do need to rely on the advice of people externally sometimes. So, you know when to get that advice, and even if you've got a proposal from a consultant, you know, you maybe give that to someone who knows something about, you know, that kind of work that can help you to approve that. Decisions are minuted. Right, so there's evidence of discussion and decisions recorded. relationships with major contractors and suppliers are documented in some sort of agreement or a contract, and that you've considered any performance measures and timelines in that. Maybe you have a list of preferred suppliers, you know, those suppliers who have been sort of vetted, and that can be all your local people. You know, that can even be relatives of people who work in your organisation or on your board, as long as it's been managed through your conflict of interest process, right? And, you know, it's not always going to be about price that people get on that list. Sometimes it's about being available and excellent service, or, you know, working well with your tenants when they go to properties. Things like that are really important. And suppliers are periodically reviewed for service quality and value. And because we love you, we're going to give you a template that you can use to assess a supplier. That comes from BNG, actually, so we're shamelessly sort of, you know, nicking it from them because we're allowed to, and we're sharing it with you. This is what it looks like. If I've got it open here for you, let me just share that with you. Open it up first, one sec. There it is. Supplier performance assessment template. That could be helpful. We go. Let's see what's included in this one. The product or service delivered, the person completing the assessment. Sharon's probably all over this one. Sharon at Tamworth. So there's some indicators of, you know, good service here. So communication, time frame for delivery, quality, cost, after sales support, quality accreditation requirements. Oh, look at that. And your overall satisfaction. Now, this is something, you know, if you were thinking about not continuing a contract with a supplier, this could be, you know, something that'd be good to complete and forward to the board to support the decision making. All right. But that's also really good review to share back with your supplier, isn't it? To give them feedback. Yeah, so there you go. They're the resources that we're going to be sharing with you. Got something in the chat here. Oh, there's some just lovely. Thanks, Kelsey. Lovely to have you here. Very, very nice to meet you online. Now, I think that is what we wanted to cover today, except I want to leave you with just this little list here, which is about values-driven decision-making. And this is when I was talking about this sort of decision-making framework that you might have in your organisation. And we've got a resource for you from the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and they've written a document along with the Governance Ethics Council, I think. And that document is called, this is another resource we're going to share with you, that document is called the AICD Guide to Ethical Decision Making in the Boardroom. And, you know, if you're interested in thinking about a framework as a values-driven organisation for decision making at the governance level, that could be helpful for you. And just some sort of, you know, tips that come out of that is when you're making decisions to think about those ethical factors and sustainability factors, is to think about diversity and inclusion, you know, and the ways that you might be an advocate for that. Your First Nations procurement strategy might just be an example of that, you know, having a look at Supply Nation and other sorts of sources of knowing about First Nations businesses. To think about social enterprise projects in your local community, you know, those that are being community driven, you know, you might be able to actually purchase through those. Collaboration and sharing resources versus purchasing. So you might be able to have a look at what some of your colleagues in the sector are doing and see if there's ways that you might be able to, you know, achieve economy of scale or achieve something together by purchasing with them. You know, so just ways of thinking about your values as an organisation, how that flows through into your procurement decisions. And we talked a little bit today about those client employment and training pathways. as part of your procurement decisions. You know, it's just ask yourself, just say, is this something that is an opportunity for us to employ a tenant or employ a client? Those are the sorts of things that can often make the big difference. So there we are. There's our hour. Well, let's just answer any questions that you might have about procurement and contract management. We do want to see that you have some way of being able to see all your contracts and monitor your contracts. And we want to see that you're making good decisions about who you use as your suppliers and how you monitor them for service quality. Those are the main things for us. The next session that we have on the wire for you is, when is it? Oh, you get invited anyway. But it's on the 7th of November, is it? Must be. Anyway, it's called Partnerships with Purpose. It's always the first Thursday of the month, and it's called Partnerships with Purpose. So we're going to delve into the partnership standard and sort of talk about some of that best practice around developing partnerships and collaborations.
We haven't done October yet. Must be October. Is it
October.
October?
Yes, it'll be October. It'll be October. I'm a month ahead of myself.
Don't do that.
I sent a contract out to someone today with the 7th of the 10th on it. I've got it. But let's see if they come back and correct me. Let's see how closely they're looking at their contract. I'm going to stop recording now, everyone, in case you want to say anything outrageous. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.